The shocking case in the suburbs of Los Angeles. On the morning of February 24, 2023, as a gentle haze lingered over the affluent suburb of Pacific Crest, Los Angeles, a discovery was about to send shockwaves across America and beyond. That day, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department responded to reports of a strange, lingering odor coming from a rental house on Willow Lane, a quiet, well-manicured street where neighbors exchanged friendly nods, and the biggest concern was usually noisy gardeners. What the police found inside would launch one of the most gruesome and high-profile criminal investigations in recent U.S. history. The victim was Allison Harper, a 28-year-old social media influencer and rising fashion icon, with nearly 4 million followers on Instagram. Her online presence was a blend of glamorous photo shoots, honest posts about single motherhood, family, and frequent appearances at A-list parties across California. Yet beneath her picture-perfect feed lay a reality far stranger than even her most loyal fans could have imagined. At the crime scene, seasoned detectives were visibly shaken. The interior was stripped of warmth with only a few pieces of mismatched furniture and heavy blackout curtains. A harsh chemical smell permeated the kitchen. An initial investigation revealed traces of industrial cleaning agents, which would later raise suspicions of a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence. In the main kitchen, officers found several large stockpots, a commercial-grade meat grinder, various knives and food containers that seemed misaligned with the lifestyle a popular influencer would lead. The refrigerator held undeniable evidence of foul play, several carefully wrapped packages whose contents would soon make headlines worldwide. The brutality of the methods employed was, according to veteran LAPD investigators, unlike any case we've encountered before. Crime scene technicians later described the efforts taken by the perpetrator, or perpetrators, to conceal Allison's remains as meticulous, almost clinical, suggesting a premeditated plan and possible knowledge of forensics. For days, helicopters circled the neighborhood, journalists swarmed the block, and rumors grew wilder with each passing hour. CNN, NBC, and the British BBC aired live coverage, while internet sleuths trawled through Allison's digital life searching for clues. Very quickly, speculation arose around motives. Was this a case of a celebrity stalker's obsession gone tragically wrong? Was it part of a complicated family feud spiraling out of control? Or something even more sinister? Friends recalled recent legal disputes over property, and others whispered about jealous ex-lovers and shadowy business partners. Police, however, kept details tightly sealed during the initial days, fueling a frenzy so intense that the local police chief warned against trial by social media. Within 48 hours, the story grew arms and legs across news cycles nationwide. Podcast producers, bloggers, and criminal psychologists debated the psychology of celebrity endangerment culture and the American obsession with fame. Protesters demanded justice, and women's rights groups seized on the case as an example of how fame cannot protect even the most privileged from hidden violence. For the Harper family, and for Allison's millions of shocked followers, the horror was magnified by the speed at which private pain became public spectacle. As the FBI joined the investigation and forensics teams worked around the clock, Allison's case would soon deepen into a dark maze of secrets, betrayals, and the blurred lines between digital fame and real-life tragedy. Background and childhood of Allison Harper. Allison Harper was born on July 15, 1994, in the middle-class neighborhoods of Seattle, Washington. Her formative years were marked by both the comforting stability of suburban life and the quiet turbulence of familial change that would shape her personality. Allison's mother, Linda Thompson, was a resourceful woman with humble beginnings in rural Idaho, who later moved to Seattle seeking better prospects. Raised primarily by Linda, Allison experienced the profound transition of her mother's remarriage to Richard Harper, a charismatic entrepreneur who owned a chain of successful farm-to-table bistros across California. The blended family eventually grew to include Allison's two younger half-sisters, Emma and Grace. Despite not sharing the same father, the three girls were inseparable. Weekends were spent at state parks, hiking forest trails, or exploring the bustling farmers markets that dotted Seattle's vibrant neighborhoods. The family's economic circumstances improved rapidly, thanks to Richard's business acumen and Linda's innate sociability. Allison was exposed from an early age to both the rewards and the challenges of affluence, luxury without arrogance, comfort without complacency. Yet this prosperity did not shield Allison from life's inevitable setbacks. After her parents' relationship eventually faltered, Linda relocated the family once again, this time to the sun-soaked suburbs of Palo Alto, California. There, Allison was thrust into the competitive environment of elite high schools, and while her affable nature helped her adapt, she keenly felt the pressure to excel. She became known among her peers for her keen sense of empathy, her love of creative writing, and her natural ability to bring people together, a quality she attributed to her mother's insistence on kindness and generosity. Despite the material comforts surrounding her, Allison's upbringing was never defined by privilege alone. Family dinners were occasions for open conversation. Linda encouraged her daughters to speak their minds, develop their individual talents, and confront difficulties head-on. These formative experiences instilled in Allison a resolve seasoned by resilience and a compassion that would become a hallmark of her later career in social media and fashion. Drawn to the world of art, Allison often spent evenings sketching in her notebook or volunteering at local animal shelters, a cause close to her heart. Her grandfather, a retired school principal, played a formative role as well, fostering a love for storytelling and intellectual curiosity. During high school, Allison's passion for creative pursuits became her calling card on Instagram, where she posted snapshots of daily life, hand-painted sneakers, and photojournals that drew a steadily growing following. By the time she graduated, Allison was known not only for her approachable beauty and distinctive fashion sense, but also for her quiet leadership and unwavering loyalty to family and friends. Her early life, marked by significant change, left her equipped to handle hardship with grace, an inner strength that, unbeknownst to her fans, foreshadowed the challenges she would face in the years to come. Childhood and first love. Allison Harper's adolescence unfolded against the backdrop of sun-drenched California neighborhoods lined with maple trees and coffee shops buzzing with teenagers. Unlike the tumultuous family changes of her earlier years, her teen life brought an intoxicating sense of belonging, a phase where she learned both the beauty and the peril of young love. Even with the privileges of her stepfather's growing restaurant empire, Allison remained grounded. She relished in the mundane joys unique to small-town American adolescence, after-school frozen yogurt runs with friends, community theater auditions, and volunteering at local animal shelters. Yet underneath that cheerful, somewhat predictable surface, the pangs of curiosity and yearning for connection simmered constantly. It was at the onset of her sophomore year in high school when Allison met Jack Miller. Jack, with his tousled hair and quiet demeanor, was a transfer student from a modest family in Santa Monica. While many gravitated toward Allison for her easy laugh and empathetic eyes, Jack approached her not with awe but with genuine curiosity, striking up conversations about books and the fading glory of classic rock bands. They quickly discovered a mutual fondness for sketching in the margins of notebooks during class, though Allison's drawings usually featured whimsical animals, while Jack's tended toward abstract geometries. This friendship grew steadily. With the arrival of senior year, their connection blossomed beyond the boundaries of platonic affection. Their first date was a stargazing trip to Malibu Beach. Allison later recalled the nervous bubble of her voice as she tried to identify constellations, only to give up and laugh with Jack about their mutual ignorance on astronomy. The simplicity and sincerity of these moments deepened their relationship in ways flashy gifts or grand gestures never could. Against a backdrop of prom dances and bittersweet graduation nights, their relationship became a quiet anchor in Allison's otherwise fast-changing world. She confided in Jack about her fears, of being overshadowed by her family's affluence or losing herself in the pressure to excel. Jack, in turn, shared his anxieties over his family's finances and struggles to fit in among wealthier peers. Through these honest exchanges, they became each other's first true support system. As college approached, the couple faced choices that would define their transition to adulthood. Both had been accepted into universities in the Bay Area, but their paths diverged. Allison received a scholarship for creative writing at Stanford, while Jack chose to attend UC Berkeley for engineering. Defying cautionary whispers about young love, the pair made a startling decision. At the age of 18, during a road trip up the Pacific Coast Highway, they eloped in a simple courthouse ceremony, trading traditional expectations for promises spoken in whispers beneath redwood trees. That leap of faith, while exhilarating, marked not only the end of childhood but the start of an entirely new era, one defined by shared dreams, mounting responsibilities, and the all-too-adult realization that fairy-tale beginnings rarely come without complications. The first storm of marriage. From the very outset, Allison Harper's first marriage was marked by highs that felt dazzling, and lows that threatened to pull her under. While her early romance with Jack Miller brimmed with hope and mutual support, reality soon encroached as their youthful idealism met the sharp edges of adulthood. Settling together in the Bay Area, the pair faced mounting pressures from financial instability, diverging career paths, and family expectations that neither could have foreseen during their carefree high school days. Jack, who once appeared as the quiet, steadfast force in Allison's life, gradually became distant. He struggled to hold down a stable job, drifting through part-time gigs that ranged from tech support to delivery driving, but nothing seemed to stick. Meanwhile, Allison, juggling a part-time position at a boutique and taking evening classes, found herself cast in the dual role of breadwinner and emotional anchor. Her efforts to keep things afloat were admirable, but the imbalance grew more obvious with each passing month. The couple's once lively apartment now echoed with unspoken tensions. Arguments flared up over simple issues, sharing chores, unpaid bills, Jack's late nights, which then snowballed into larger disputes about aspirations and trust. Friends noticed the shift and offered support, but Allison, loyal to a fault, was hesitant to confide the depth of her unhappiness. She still remembered her mother's example of perseverance and wanted desperately to believe that love, with enough effort, could weather any storm. Yet, hidden beneath the domestic drama were darker currents. Jack's frustration with his limited prospects led him down risky paths. Around 2014, he began associating with a group of acquaintances involved in petty theft and minor fraud, seeking fast money as mounting debts pressed in. At first, Allison dismissed his late-night absences as work shifts or study sessions, but soon she discovered evidence: unusual amounts of cash, a suspicious cell phone, and cryptic text messages. The truth hit her with the force of a tidal wave. Jack was implicated in criminal activities, and her attempts to question him spiraled into explosive arguments. Allison's moral compass would not allow her to turn a blind eye. Torn between her vows and her values, she urged Jack to seek help and disengage from his worsening situation. For a brief, fragile period, Jack promised to change. He started attending counseling, and the couple attempted to rebuild trust. But the damage was done, suspicions lingered, and Allison's trust, once boundless, frayed at the edges. By 2015, the stress had multiplied. Jack's encounters with law enforcement became more frequent and public, attracting the attention of both their families and local authorities. Allison, who had always cherished her privacy, now found herself involuntarily thrust into the spotlight. Rumors circulated at her workplace and among friends, with some urging her to run while others reminded her of marriage's sacred commitment. Their home, once filled with laughter and art projects, developed an atmosphere of dread and uncertainty. Allison's dreams were plagued by anxiety, and she often woke in the middle of the night, wrestling with doubt and guilt. She began journaling, writing frantic entries that oscillated between hope for reconciliation and acceptance that their life together was unsalvageable. Events came to a head one rainy December night. After learning that Jack was wanted on multiple counts of fraud and theft in wealthy Los Angeles suburbs, and that he'd been using social media scams to siphon off money from unsuspecting victims, Allison faced the hardest decision of her life. She packed a suitcase, left a carefully worded letter for Jack, and called her mother in tears. When police began asking questions, Allison cooperated fully, providing what little information she could, and seeking legal guidance to clear her own name. The fallout was brutal. Jack, desperate to evade arrest, left California, essentially abandoning Allison and their child. In the aftermath, custody of their young son was awarded temporarily to Jack's family. Allison, devastated and reeling from public scandal, was forced to rebuild her life from the ground up in Los Angeles. Each step forward was marked by doubt, but also by the slow restoration of self-respect and the rediscovery of her resilience. Looking back, Allison would later reflect that her first marriage, although deeply painful, taught her boundaries, the meaning of self-worth, and the non-negotiable value of integrity. It was the storm that broke her old self apart but allowed something far stronger to emerge in its wake. Divorce and starting life. Over. After the stormy end of her first marriage, Allison Harper scraped herself off the ground with a grit that few could muster. The legal proceedings were exhausting, a pattern of lawyer meetings, custody hearings, and paperwork that seemed to stretch on endlessly, each document reminding her of a life unraveling. The temporary loss of custody of her son to Jack's family left a gnawing void. Rather than spiraling into bitterness or regret, Allison channeled her hurt into a driving sense of purpose. Moving to Los Angeles wasn't just an escape. It was a deliberate act of self-preservation and renewal. She arrived with little more than a battered compact car, a couple of suitcases, and her favorite sketchbooks, symbols of dreams she refused to abandon. The city pulsed with energy, ambition, and a promise that reinvention was not only possible, but an essential part of its DNA. For Allison, every sleepless night in her tiny studio apartment became another brick in the foundation of her new life. She took on multiple jobs at once, hustling as an assistant in a small fashion boutique during the day, waitressing in the evenings, while pouring her free time into curating an authentic online persona. Her presence on social media blossomed. Rather than masking her scars, Allison spoke candidly about her struggles, and followers gravitated towards her openness. She became a voice for single mothers, survivors of emotional turmoil, and anyone fumbling towards a fresh start. Corporations soon took notice, offering her advertising deals and collaboration opportunities that lifted her from the realm of survival into one of emerging success. Amid her growing stability, Allison's path crossed with Chris Young. Chris was the son of a renowned restaurateur, himself a rising figure in hospitality circles in Southern California. Their meeting was almost cinematic. He spilled a double-shot latte on her sketchbook at a downtown coffeehouse, and instead of sparking anger, the mishap turned into a conversation about resilience and flawed beginnings. Both bore the marks of family complications and public scrutiny, but Chris proved to be unwavering in his support. The transition into this new relationship was marked by more caution and a focus on healthy boundaries for herself and her children. Allison relied on lessons learned from her previous marriage, to listen for red flags, to honor her own ambitions, and to set expectations grounded in mutual respect. While the wounds from her first marriage would never disappear completely, they became a kind of scar tissue, tough and instructive, shaping her into someone both softer and more formidable. Chris's family, with its deep roots in the community and their appreciation for Allison's authenticity, welcomed her with unexpected warmth. Together the couple built not just a career, but a home. When Allison gained permanent custody of her son, it was a quiet, celebratory moment, a hard-won victory felt deeply by everyone in her chosen family. In time, she would add 2 more children to their bustling, blended household, and her social media accounts brimmed with snapshots of laughter, art projects, and everyday chaos. In the eyes of Hollywood and beyond, Allison Harper's comeback became more than a personal story. It was a cultural touchstone. Her journey from tabloid scandal to style icon and influencer was dissected by podcasts, talk shows, and think pieces. Rather than shying away, Allison owned her narrative, speaking publicly about the stigma of divorce, the perils of misplaced loyalty, and the necessity of putting one's mental health first. To support herself and her growing family, Allison dove deeper into the fashion world. She launched a collaborative accessory line, mixing sustainable sourcing with original designs, a reflection of her values and creative voice. These endeavors caught the attention of local and national media, placing her in the spotlight for all the right reasons this time. Invitations rolled in for panels on women's empowerment, entrepreneurship, and even post-traumatic growth. Allison continued to send financial support to Jack's family, not as a gesture of reconciliation, but out of concern for her child's well-being and a commitment to decency. Though repeatedly warned that her kindness might be exploited, she doubled down on her principles, believing that one's integrity defines them more than vengeance ever could. This strength of character, juxtaposed with her vulnerability, resonated with others navigating complex family structures in a rapidly changing society. Stepping into her new life, Allison surrounded herself with trustworthy friends, mentors, and a chosen family, people who valued her journey rather than her reputation. Her Los Angeles home became a gathering place for other women forging their own paths, a sanctuary for resilience and ambition. Over the years, she became a fixture not only in Hollywood but also in advocacy circles, quietly leveraging her influence to support organizations aiding women and children facing crisis. In retrospect, the period following her divorce wasn't just about surviving heartbreak, it was about learning to trust again, embracing the possibility of happiness after disaster, and demonstrating, for her children and audience, that starting over could be an act of strength, not shame. Each day was still filled with moments of vulnerability, but they were matched by triumphs that, brick by brick, rebuilt a life worth celebrating. Fame spread like wildfire in Hollywood. In the span of just a few years, Allison Harper's rise to prominence in Hollywood could be described as nothing short of meteoric. After trudging her way through personal upheavals and public scrutiny, she emerged in Los Angeles with a renewed sense of drive, one that would soon make her a household name. Her journey from the pain of divorce and the tumult of single motherhood to the dazzling spotlights of the entertainment industry became a topic of fascination not only for her growing audience, but also for local media and industry insiders. Allison's first steps into the world of glitz and glamour weren't through the usual routes of auditions or agency scouting. Instead, she leaned into her online persona, incrementally building a brand rooted in authenticity, resilience, and an understated elegance that set her apart in a city obsessed with spectacle. Her Instagram and YouTube channels documented not just curated perfect moments, but also behind-the-scenes glimpses into her struggles, late-night sketching sessions, tired eyes after working double shifts, snippets of her son's laughter in their cozy, cluttered apartment. This intimate, transparent approach quickly resonated with tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands of followers from around the world. Invitations began pouring in, first to exclusive boutique openings, charity galas, and independent film screenings, then to major red carpet events and industry panels. Allison herself was surprised at how seamlessly she was accepted by social circles that once seemed out of reach. Hollywood's elite, charmed by her story and grace under fire, frequently praised her both on social media and in interviews, calling her a breath of fresh air and a role model for the digital age. Simultaneously, industry professionals took note of her business acumen. She accepted brand sponsorships selectively, only aligning herself with companies that reflected her ethics: sustainable fashion lines, eco-friendly beauty products, and mother-owned startups. These partnerships not only boosted her financial independence but also cemented her image as a tastemaker. It wasn't long before Allison was sitting front row at LA Fashion Week, hosting panel discussions about social media transparency and appearing on morning talk shows to share her insights on parenting, resilience, and creative entrepreneurship. Behind the scenes, her blended family life with Chris Young played a significant role in sustaining her momentum. Their partnership created a foundation of stability, and Allison often praised Chris's support in public interviews. Their home became a set for photo shoots and vlogs, centered around candid conversations, art projects, and the everyday chaos of a growing household. When Allison welcomed 2 more children with Chris, her followers celebrated alongside her, and the Harper Young family's dynamic became a case study in healthy co-parenting and the redefinition of modern family ideals. Allison's fame also brought responsibilities, and she embraced them. She became a prominent advocate for women rebuilding their lives after divorce or loss, launching workshops and mentorship programs both in person and online. Reporters covered her charitable work for women's shelters and youth education initiatives. She routinely leveraged her platform to champion causes close to her heart, from child welfare policy to mental health awareness in the social media era. This confluence of authenticity, ambition, and altruism distinguished Allison from the ever-changing roster of Hollywood it girls. Her public persona became both armor and invitation, protecting her from old wounds yet welcoming newcomers and supporters who shared her values. Allison Harper's name, once whispered in association with scandal, had become synonymous with resilience, substance, and the limitless possibility of second acts. In Hollywood's history of fame, her trajectory stood as a reminder. Sometimes the most compelling stars are those who refuse to hide their scars. Disputes and mysteries behind the glamour. In the years following her meteoric ascent, Allison Harper's life, for all its public glamour, quietly simmered with a complexity few fans ever suspected. While magazines and late-night hosts extolled her resilience and transformation, the truth behind the curtains of fame was a tangled web of trust, ambition, and private reckoning. Elements that would challenge the very foundation on which she'd rebuilt her world. It began, almost imperceptibly, with financial entanglements left over from her tumultuous first marriage. Despite moving forward, Allison never fully escaped the gravitational pull of her past with Jack Miller and his extended family. Out of loyalty to her son, and an enduring, if fraught sense of decency, she continued to provide financial support to Jack's relatives long after their legal ties were severed. Initially, these gestures stemmed from genuine concern for her child's well-being, a belief that stability, even in fragmented form, mattered most. But as months turned into years, it became clear to Allison that her generosity opened doors for subtle exploitation. Jack's family, sensing Allison's guarded but persistent goodwill, began making escalating demands, disguised as urgent requests for her son's needs or as investment opportunities meant to benefit everyone. Allison, now more seasoned and cautious, scrutinized each proposal. Still, the barrage of appeals wore down her resolve. The emotional calculus of supporting the lineage of someone who openly betrayed her proved exhausting. At times, she confided in Chris Young, her new partner, voicing fears that her attempts at maintaining peace were fueling an endless cycle of dependency. But maternal guilt and the specter of public shaming kept her trapped. She didn't want to appear callous in front of her audience, nor risk alienating her child from their paternal roots. Through these dealings, Allison also became tangled in the murky waters of California real estate. To secure her son's future and minimize legal exposure for both sides, she chose at one point to invest in a lucrative property, gifting partial ownership to Jack's father, hoping to avoid tax pitfalls and shield herself from further litigation. Unbeknownst to Allison, this well-intentioned maneuver would become the seedbed of deeper conflict. Jack's family saw the property as leverage, a resource to be pursued, challenged, and ultimately controlled. Disputes soon arose about the building's usage, future sale, and rights to rental income. As Allison's Hollywood profile surged, the asset's value and the stakes of the ongoing dispute skyrocketed correspondingly. The situation found echoes in the persistent gossip columns and rumor mill. Certain celebrity blogs questioned Allison's motivations, speculating whether her acts of goodwill masked darker secrets. Anonymous sources claimed she was buying silence, or that she remained emotionally, if not legally, entangled with Jack's clan out of fear or unfinished business. Allison, meanwhile, attempted to keep the legal wrangling as private as possible. Her team of attorneys worked to establish clear boundaries, yet every negotiation with Jack's family felt like quicksand. The more she attempted to extract herself, the deeper she sank. In the midst of this, Allison's new life, her thriving brand, her blended family with Chris, her public advocacy, began to feel encroached upon by relentless private stress. She found herself canceling public appearances last minute due to family emergencies, dodging invasive questions from reporters about her business connections, and quietly settling disputes that, if made public, could have sparked scandal. The pressure affected not only Allison but her immediate family. Chris grew frustrated at the constant backdrop of litigation and inflexibility from Jack's family. Allison's children, especially her eldest son, struggled with the confusion and divided loyalties that intermittent legal battles and whispered acrimony created. The disputes weren't solely about money or property. As the years passed, tensions spilled over into the digital domain. Jack's relatives occasionally used social media to air grievances, portraying Allison as cold or manipulative. In response, her loyal followers, accustomed to her transparency and warmth, flooded comment sections with support and denials. But beneath the surface, Allison was acutely aware of how quickly public sentiment could turn. She hired reputation management consultants, issued carefully crafted statements, and doubled down on her charitable work to reinforce a narrative of empowerment and integrity. Still, the fear of a single misstep, a leaked document, or a private negotiation gone awry haunted her daily routine. Adding to the tension, mysterious incidents began to occur around the properties in question. Neighbors reported suspicious figures late at night. There were unexplained break-ins where nothing of value seemed to be stolen, and police were called multiple times for trespassing. Allison's lawyers traced several legal challenges back to shell companies with obscure connections to Jack's cousins. Whether these actions were orchestrated campaigns of harassment or the random misdeeds of opportunists, the cumulative effect was intimidating. On some evenings, Allison would linger by her living room window, watching the street below for unfamiliar cars, the glow of her phone casting long shadows across the lacquered floors. Allison's emotional resilience, often cited by fans as her defining trait, was tested to its limits. She began attending therapy more regularly, confiding her deepest fears and doubts to a tight circle of confidants. Her journal entries from this period revealed a woman straining against both public expectation and private fatigue. "I built this new life on honesty," she wrote, "but sometimes I wonder if my devotion to peace just creates more shadows." Complicating the situation were emerging stories in the press about secret settlements and hush money. Though most were exaggerated or outright fabrications, they contributed to a climate of suspicion. Tabloid headlines speculated on the true cost of Hollywood reinvention, painting Allison's life as a cautionary tale, one where wealth and goodwill only attracted further danger. At industry events, colleagues offered veiled words of support. "Ignore the noise, Allison, all stars have their crosses to bear." Yet she felt the chilly undercurrent of judgment. Some brands hesitated to renew contracts, wary of the baggage that now clung to her public image. Privately, tension also crept into Allison's relationship with Chris. Blending families under the best of circumstances was hard enough. Compounding it with ongoing disputes, security concerns, and endless negotiations proved almost unbearable. The two attended counseling together, determined not to repeat the mistakes of Allison's first marriage. Yet both harbored fears about the toll the past was taking on their present, a worry made more acute by their knowledge that even the most loving household could crack under external pressure. One of the most disquieting chapters came when Jack's sister, a once amiable presence in Allison's son's life, sued for visitation with a legal strategy manifestly designed to tie Allison up in court. The drawn-out legal proceedings were peppered with aggressive depositions and conflicting witness statements. While ultimately resolved in Allison's favor, the ordeal was emotionally grueling and reinforced her resolve to sever the remaining legal threads connecting her to that side of the family. Ironically, each victory felt hollow. Winning usually meant another chapter of discomfort and awkward silences at family functions. Allison joked darkly to a friend, "Some divorces are never really finalized, they just get new paperwork." Even as she tried to shield her children, whispered accusations surfaced at school and online, students repeating things they'd heard from adults, parents carefully watching at playdates, and teachers unsure whether to address the elephant in the room. Allison felt a new sense of vulnerability, both for herself and her children, recognizing how easily childhood could be marred by adult recrimination. She increased security precautions at home, turned down several lucrative out-of-town speaking engagements, and poured more energy into philanthropy. Her efforts culminated in a new foundation supporting families navigating post-divorce trauma, an enterprise both deeply personal and in some ways a protective moat against further attacks. Despite her best efforts, mysteries continued to cluster around Allison's private life. Rumors persisted that larger forces, shadowy investors with ties to old Hollywood money, or powerful entertainment lawyers with scores to settle, were working behind the scenes to undermine her. Documents leaked to the press hinted at hidden clauses in property deeds, whispers of undisclosed beneficiaries, and hotly contested life insurance policies. Each new headline invited another round of speculation. Was Allison truly the architect of her own fortune, or somehow ensnared in a labyrinth of secrets not entirely of her making? Journalists and internet sleuths pored over every available detail, often connecting dots that hardly belonged in the same picture. Some conspiracy theorists posited that Allison was being blackmailed, or that she had stumbled across a truth too dangerous for public consumption. Others theorized about estranged relatives, long-lost siblings, or hidden fortunes overseas, none with a shred of credible evidence, but all with the oxygen of a 24/7 news cycle and legions of armchair detectives online. Amid the confusion, Allison strove to control her own narrative. She gave honest interviews, offered controlled glimpses into her home life, and avoided discussing the most sensitive disputes unless required by the court. "What I want most is normalcy," she stated during a televised interview. "Fame is a privilege, but it comes with a price. My family deserves to be safe, even if I can't always guarantee peace." Her resolve, delivered with poise, only seemed to amplify her allure in the public's imagination. Behind the scenes, Allison's life remained a delicate balancing act. She spent afternoons in depositions, then rushed home for school pickups and art projects with her youngest children. She negotiated with lawyers and accountants by day, then attended charity galas by night, always alert to the prospect that a well-meaning handshake could be the prelude to the next legal curveball. Those closest to her admired her grace under pressure, the way she transformed anxiety into advocacy and personal misfortune into public purpose, but also worried about the heavy toll she bore. As tensions finally began to ease, Allison reflected on the years spent under siege. She described the period as living in a house with walls made of glass, beautiful but fragile, and never entirely safe. While some relationships were irreparably damaged, others were forged or strengthened through adversity. By the end of it all, she had become more than a Hollywood story of comeback and charisma. Allison Harper was a case study in the darker cost of celebrity, a woman who persevered not because she was untouched by scandal, but because she learned to survive and adapt within it. A fateful turning point and dark conspiracy. From the outside, 2023 appeared to be a period of newfound stability in Allison Harper's whirlwind life. She was basking in the success of her latest business venture, regularly gracing industry galas with her trademark composure and enjoying her growing family. Yet beneath the polished surface a quiet storm brewed, a confluence of old resentments, tangled finances and shifting loyalties that would soon upend everything she had worked so relentlessly to rebuild. It all began when Allison decided it was finally time to disentangle herself once and for all from lingering ties to her ex-husband Jack's family. The home, technically her investment but gifted in part to Jack's father years ago, had become a source of endless dispute, attracting property lawyers like vultures and serving as a backdrop for countless acrimonious negotiations. Allison's intent was clean and pragmatic: to sell the property, divide the legally mandated share, and move forward, giving both families breathing room and financial closure. For months, the transaction felt like an endless maze. Jack's relatives, sensing both the commercial value and the symbolic power of the estate, maneuvered persistently to block or delay the sale. Some of the arguments were technical, challenging signatures, contesting years-old agreements, or claiming improvements fully funded by family labor. Others were emotional appeals, invoking Allison's son's right to a family legacy, or dredging up half-forgotten grievances from the divorce. Allison, weary but resolute, persisted, surrounded by legal counsel but burdened by the sense that the ghosts of her past simply wouldn't release their grip. Behind the scenes, the harassment escalated. Unmarked letters demanding more favorable terms appeared in her Los Angeles mailbox. At family events, Jack's extended relatives would corner Allison with veiled threats and emotional manipulation. Rumors began swirling online, fanned by anonymous social media accounts with suspicious ties to Jack's inner circle. Journalists started asking pointed questions about Allison's relationship with her ex-in-laws and the possible motives behind the prolonged real estate battle. Everywhere she turned, Allison felt the walls closing in. Things took a darker turn in early 2023, when Allison's trusted assistant noticed irregularities in her financial records. Funds originally set aside for the maintenance and legal management of the disputed property had suddenly been rerouted, first through shell companies, then through private accounts linked, albeit loosely, to associates of Jack's family. At first it seemed a desperate act of financial clawback. But as Allison dug deeper with the help of private investigators, a more insidious pattern emerged. Someone was constructing a network of fake invoices, laundering proceeds, and carefully covering their tracks to implicate Allison herself in potential fraud. Faced with mounting pressure and fearful for her family's safety, Allison began to cut contact with everyone linked to the old disputes, and yet the psychological warfare did not let up. She fielded cryptic phone calls warning her to abandon the property sale, received unsettling gifts left on her doorstep, and even found herself followed by unfamiliar cars late at night. It was as if declaring her independence had triggered a coordinated campaign to either intimidate or destroy her. Allison's days became a blur of legal consultations, security briefings, and hushed conversations with those she still trusted. Her mental health began to fray. For the first time since her divorce, she felt truly hunted. Chris, her partner, doubled down on household security and insisted their children be accompanied everywhere. Allison's sleep grew restless, haunted by nightmares, her mind looping through the possibility that someone she'd once called family harbored a darkness she could never have predicted. Meanwhile, authorities finally started connecting the dots. Early summer brought police inquiries into the property's mismanagement, with several members of Jack's family called in for questioning about suspected embezzlement and extortion. Allison was as much a witness as a potential victim, required to turn over years' worth of handwritten notes, emails, and financial logs. The case grew larger than anyone expected. Detectives flagged an intricate conspiracy not only to siphon her assets but, horrifyingly, to leverage her public image as a bargaining chip, threatening to leak selected materials that could frame her as complicit unless she met their ever-increasing demands. By August, the tension peaked. Allison realized her former in-laws were not merely fighting her in court or in the tabloids, but operating as a coordinated group, a criminal enterprise driven by both resentments and greed. Secret audio recordings obtained by investigators revealed explicit plans to lure Allison into physical danger under the guise of a family meeting. Armed with this knowledge but racked by anxiety, Allison made a fateful decision. She would not yield, no matter how high the personal cost. The next weeks would test her resolve in ways she could never have foreseen. The actual turning point occurred in late February, when Allison agreed to meet with Jack's older brother at a neutral public cafe to finalize documents. Suspicious of his sudden willingness to negotiate, she alerted both her personal security team and her legal advisor. What she didn't know was that prior to the meeting, Jack's brother had orchestrated a calculated abduction attempt and, according to later police reports, hired third-party fixers with criminal backgrounds to surveil and isolate Allison's movements. That afternoon, moments after leaving the cafe, Allison's vehicle was intercepted on a quiet residential street. She managed to trigger the emergency alarm she now always kept on her keyring, which brought police and private security to the scene just in time to prevent her from being forcibly relocated. The would-be assailants fled on foot, but left behind enough evidence: a discarded burner phone, a hastily abandoned duffel bag with legal documents and cash, to ignite a full-scale criminal investigation. In the chaos that followed, the FBI joined local law enforcement to comb through the web of threats, tracking the digital breadcrumbs left by the conspirators. Interrogations revealed that Allison's abduction was not merely a violent power play over real estate, but part of a broader plan to coerce her signature on high-value transfers and then disappear her, ensuring both financial and reputational ruin. The scope of the conspiracy sent shockwaves through Los Angeles's elite, many of whom had dismissed Allison's prior warnings as the anxieties of an overexposed public figure. As the months wore on, the full depravity of the plot emerged. Dozens of individuals, from distant cousins to crooked corporate attorneys, were implicated in a clandestine effort to extort, frame, and ultimately silence Allison Harper. Her courage in the face of repeated intimidation, and her exhaustive documentation of every threat, email, and suspicious encounter helped prosecutors build a formidable case. National media seized on the shocking details, the depths of family betrayal, the extremes of Hollywood greed, and the chilling vulnerability of even the most admired influencers. For Allison, the trauma did not disappear with the unmasking of the plot. She found herself repeatedly questioning who in her inner circle might have harbored hidden motives. Chris and her children suffered through months of renewed scrutiny, forced to navigate school and work shadowed by constant media attention. Through therapy, advocacy work, and the unwavering support of a handful of true friends, Allison began, slowly, to process her ordeal and reclaim a sense of agency. The dark plot that changed Allison Harper's destiny became a watershed moment, both for her personally and as a cautionary tale throughout the entertainment world. Her ordeal exposed not only the fragility of fame, but also the dark lengths to which envy, familial conflict, and unchecked ambition can drive ordinary people. Standing at last in the sunlight again, Allison carried forward the scars, but also a new philosophy. Trust, yes, but never without vigilance, and never again at the cost of her own safety or self-respect. Fateful day, the mysterious disappearance. On February 21st, the day that would soon send shockwaves throughout Los Angeles and beyond, Allison Harper woke up with a sense of unease she couldn't quite pinpoint. The Southern California air was thick with morning fog, a soft gray shroud that dimmed even the sharpest sunlight peeking through her bedroom window. From outward appearances, she was carrying on as usual, packing lunches for her children, touching base over the phone with her business manager, and sharing a quick, heartfelt message with her growing social media audience. There was no sign, at least on the surface, of what was about to unfold. What few people knew was that, in the days leading up to her disappearance, Allison had confided in a handful of trusted friends about mounting pressure from her former in-laws and the intensifying disputes over family assets. She'd been feeling watched, odd cars idling outside her home, late-night messages from unknown numbers, strange packages left without explanation on her doorstep. Friends later recalled the paranoia etched in her voice, the hints of exhaustion beneath every reassuring smile. But Allison was never one to yield to fear. That morning, after dropping her youngest at preschool and sending brief texts to her eldest son, she called her closest friend, Lauren. The conversation was tense but mundane. Allison spoke about needing a break, looking forward to seeing her son that afternoon, and half joking about the circus her life had become. According to Lauren, Allison even made plans to meet up for coffee later that week, insisting she just wanted one normal day. It was just before noon when Allison received a call from Jack's older brother, who told her he would pick her up to drive out and collect her son together. According to later phone logs, Allison hesitated but ultimately agreed, hoping this act of good faith would help settle tensions for her child's sake. Security cameras captured her leaving the house, a quick wave over her shoulder as she got into a white SUV that pulled up in front. That would be the last confirmed sighting of Allison Harper ever recorded. What happened next remains to this day, cloaked in confusion and conspiracy. The SUV did not drive directly to any school or family property. Instead, GPS data, later uncovered by investigators, showed a meandering route through unfamiliar suburban side streets, doubling back and taking deliberate detours. Surveillance footage from city intersections picked up brief glimpses of the car, but lost it heading toward a less populated industrial district on the city's outskirts. When Allison failed to arrive for her son's pickup, alarms started ringing. The school tried to call both parents repeatedly, but neither answered. Meanwhile, Chris Young, Allison's partner, grew increasingly anxious as her phone went straight to voicemail. By evening, her family realized something was very wrong. Calls to friends, neighbors, and even Jack's relatives produced only shrugs and blank denials. Chris and Linda, Allison's mother, quickly organized a search effort, flooding social media with pleas for information and offering a multi-million-dollar reward for credible leads. As news of Allison's mysterious disappearance broke, the internet lit up with outrage and dread. Her face flashed across national headlines, trending hashtags mobilized a digital army of supporters, and major news outlets camped outside her gated neighborhood. Police set up tip lines and combed through traffic cam footage. Psychics, armchair detectives, and self-declared true crime aficionados began speculating wildly. Was it a kidnapping by a violent ex-in-law, a botched ransom attempt, or the grim conclusion of a multi-year campaign of intimidation? The investigation became one of the most challenging in recent LAPD history. Law enforcement coordinated with the FBI to chase down every possible lead. Forensic specialists swept Allison's home and the last known vehicle for evidence of foul play. The white SUV, curiously registered to a shell company nominally controlled by Jack's cousin, vanished without a trace, as if swallowed by the sprawling metropolis. Initial searches of nearby industrial zones turned up only dead ends and cryptic traces. Tire marks, a single pink earring, and a coffee cup with Allison's initials smudged at the rim. Days turned into weeks, each interview and press conference offering more questions than answers. Chris, Linda, and the children remained under police protection, haunted by intrusive media and the unspeakable agony of not knowing. Allison's disappearance became a rallying cry for women's safety and a grim warning about the dangers lurking behind domestic and high-profile disputes. Activist groups held vigils, Hollywood peers created viral awareness videos, and anonymous tips poured in from as far as Arizona and Nevada. Gradually, a partial timeline began to emerge. Witnesses recalled seeing Allison at a gas station, seemingly calm but accompanied by a man she seemed to know. The SUV was spotted again, hours later, on a dusty, seldom-used road outside the city. Security footage from a highway toll booth showed only the vehicle's shadowy outline, the driver's face hidden. Each new piece of information drew Allison's family and the public deeper into a maze of mystery, fueling endless theories from cartel involvement to organized crime, to an inside job orchestrated by someone she once trusted. Amidst growing media frenzy, Allison's absence became a kind of silent echo across social circles. Her Instagram left frozen on an optimistic morning post, her brand deals pausing out of respect, her fans launching grassroots campaigns for answers. Privately, her children were shielded from the worst details, but the dissonance of missing their mother was inescapable. Schools arranged special counseling, friends tiptoed around the topic, and neighbors posted yellow ribbons in solidarity. Investigators continued their work undeterred. Snippets of evidence surfaced, text messages deleted from Allison's phone just before her disappearance, camera footage of unfamiliar vehicles circling her home the night prior, and ATM withdrawals from accounts linked to her ex-husband's extended family. Yet despite these clues, the how and why still refused to take shape. Every promising break seemed to unravel, and frustration mounted as days passed without a sign, a ransom note, or any claim of responsibility. As March unfolded, the case dominated television panels and podcasts. Media personalities dissected everything, pulling apart Allison's last interviews, analyzing body language on reality shows, and even speculating about previous threats she may have suffered. Law enforcement, meanwhile, urged restraint, warning the public against spreading misinformation or interfering with official lines of inquiry. Yet nothing could dam the river of conjecture. Curiously, those closest to Allison began reporting eerily similar experiences. Harassing calls, cryptic warnings, and a sense of being watched. Some speculated that her disappearance was just the first act in a broader campaign, targeting others who'd challenged the toxic family dynamics that had shadowed her for years. Chris found his car tires slashed one morning. Her assistant, Lauren, received a package of shredded documents and a note. The truth costs. Even her children's schools enacted new security measures, unwilling to dismiss the faint possibility the threat wasn't over. As weeks bled into months, hope and dread became bedfellows in the hearts of those what loved Allison Harper. Candlelight vigils shimmered on city streets, voices raised in prayer and protest. A mural appeared on the wall of her favorite cafe, displaying not just her face but urgent questions. Where is Allison? Who profits from silence? The reward climbed even higher. Private investigator teams were dispatched to distant states, following reported sightings that always fizzled out in disappointment. The gravity of Allison's absence became inescapable, a wound across the city, and a symbol for every family left without answers. Hollywood, once cynical and jaded, felt its collective heart shatter for a woman lauded for both her glamour and vulnerability. Friends, colleagues, and fans alike began to measure time by before Allison vanished and after. Meanwhile, for the authorities, every empty warehouse and unused lot in Los Angeles became a potential scene of revelation or heartbreak. Occasional discoveries, a scarf matching Allison's wardrobe, droplets of what could be blood on a discarded shoe, kept hope alive while fanning fear. Forensic scientists combed each shred of evidence, DNA matching every bit of biological data from Allison's personal effects. Each dead end only underscored the enormity of the challenge. In a city of millions, how could one person simply vanish? By the end of spring, the case remained open, frustratingly unresolved but never forgotten. Allison Harper's name became synonymous with a mystery that refused to die. Family and friends clung to hope, their lives suspended between the desire for closure and the terror of what that closure might ultimately reveal. Hollywood, the nation, and an ever-growing global audience waited, breath held, as the days ticked by, hoping beyond hope that the truth would someday come to light. Investigation and the horrifying truth. In the aftermath of Allison Harper's disappearance, the investigation was propelled into the national spotlight, instantly becoming one of the most complex cases in recent Los Angeles history. From the start, the LAPD's Missing Persons Unit, already working in tandem with the FBI, recognized they were not dealing with a simple abduction or runaway scenario. The trail of ominous threats, convoluted financial ties, and public intrigue demanded a multi-layered approach unlike any the city had witnessed in years. The first 48 hours were marked by sheer chaos and mounting public pressure. Allison's family and friends worked closely with detectives, handing over every scrap of information they could muster: text messages, emails, surveillance footage from their security system, witness statements from neighbors and business contacts. Each new data point only seemed to deepen the mystery. Investigators found themselves reconstructing Allison's final days minute by minute, trying to divine some actionable pattern amid the noise. As detectives followed the digital breadcrumbs, they uncovered a web of surveillance that had surrounded Allison for months. Cell tower pings mapped the path of the elusive white SUV that ferried her away on the morning of her disappearance, revealing not a straight shot to school or work, but a series of stops at obscure industrial locations across Los Angeles County. Some sites had no obvious link to Allison's previous life, but one derelict warehouse featured heavily, its ownership traced to a shell corporation tied indirectly to a distant cousin on Jack's side of the family. Forensic teams descended upon the warehouse, meticulously searching for any trace evidence: discarded fibers, fingerprints, stray bits of DNA. Among the detritus, they found Allison's missing cell phone, stripped of its SIM card and power, but not before the device's last moments had been partially captured by cloud backup, including a hastily typed but unsent message that read only, "I think this is a setup." This chilling fragment would fuel media speculation for weeks. The investigation was hindered at every turn by clever misdirections and technological subterfuge. Financial records and legal documents tied to Allison's contested assets had been doctored or erased, important potential witnesses were intimidated, and anonymous threats flooded both law enforcement and the Harper family itself. Investigators constructed a war room of timelines, relationship maps, and motive analyses, only to find again and again that crucial information was missing or contradictory. Meanwhile, a growing cadre of suspects was quietly assembled and interrogated. Jack's relatives, once contentiously at odds with Allison in the courtroom, now found themselves under laser-focused scrutiny. One uncle, already on parole, was arrested on unrelated charges and subsequently caught making incriminating phone calls from jail, Another family member failed a polygraph and refused to account for their whereabouts on the day of the disappearance, infuriating Allison's advocates and private investigators alike. As the weeks dragged on, the case took a darker turn with the discovery of grim evidence. Forensic analysts uncovered traces of blood, matching Allison's DNA, in the trunk of the abandoned white SUV. Nearby, in a drainage ditch less than a mile from the warehouse, divers recovered a set of personal effects: a necklace known to be Allison's, tangled with locks of hair, and clothing remnants torn as though by force. It was a gruesome confirmation of what many had feared. The abduction wasn't simply about power or leverage, it had become a violent crime. Simultaneously, financial crimes investigators unraveled a cascade of forged transactions, leading not only to Allison's disputed property, but to a network of accounts registered to her ex-husband's extended family. Subpoenas and international requests exposed a laundering operation that, while not vast by organized crime standards, was startlingly bold for a suburban family feud. The funds traced back suggested a clear and chilling motive. Eliminating Allison would neatly resolve threatened lawsuits, guarantee inheritance, and silence the only person capable of testifying about the original scam. In a shocking twist, several members of Jack's family buckled under sustained interrogation, eventually confessing to their roles in the conspiracy. The story that emerged was one of escalating desperation. As legal options dwindled and debts mounted, resentment curdled into a macabre plot. Allison had been lured under the pretense of a final negotiation and forced at gunpoint to sign over financial documents. When she attempted to resist and appeal to sympathy, the situation spiraled out of control. According to sworn testimony, there was never a consensus among the perpetrators. Some wanted to extort, others were convinced violence was unavoidable, and a handful tried unsuccessfully to pull back before it was too late. What happened in the warehouse became the dark heart of the case. Details released gradually to the media stunned the public. Allison's efforts to fight back, the panic and disarray among her captors, and the irrevocable decision to silence her rather than risk exposure. The cleanup was as cold and calculated as the plot itself, with bleach, industrial tools, and false leads intended to confound investigators for months. The scope of the crime and its fallout turned the investigation into a national scandal. Legal teams on all sides filed injunctions and allegations, but ultimately, prosecutors secured multiple indictments for conspiracy, kidnapping, fraud, and murder. For the forensic community, the Harper case became a landmark example of digital forensics, family psychology, and the intersection of fame and personal threat. Investigators shared their experiences at law enforcement conferences, detailing the use of cloud backups, security cam geofencing, and the importance of early access to digital evidence. For Allison's loved ones and the public at large, the investigation revealed not just the brutality behind her disappearance, but the vulnerability of even the most seemingly powerful figures to the darkness lurking in private life. Candlelight vigils were held in dozens of cities, panels convened to discuss reform in interfamily dispute law, and advocacy groups built memorial scholarships in Allison's name. Despite the eventual closure provided by confessions, indictments, and a mountain of evidence, the Harper investigation left unanswered questions and lasting wounds. Some family members vanished into the legal system, refusing ever to speak publicly of their motivations. Chilling rumors persisted in online communities suggesting there were still secrets yet to be unearthed. Rumors of more accomplices, blackmailed insiders, or hidden caches of digital evidence waiting to surface. The case became a point of reference for the perils of sudden fame, the tides of envy and unresolved family turmoil, and the limits of even the most advanced investigative techniques. The revelations of the Harper case were not just about criminality, but about the price of trust, the weight of legacy, and the devastating, often irreparable damage inflicted by betrayal. In the years that followed, Allison's name became synonymous with both tragedy and resilience, a story retold as a warning and a call to vigilance for those who tread the uncertain ground between public acclaim and private agony. Community impact and response. In the wake of Allison Harper's disappearance, the collective heartbeat of Los Angeles, and soon, the entire nation, seemed to skip. The news of her vanishing was more than a headline. It struck a nerve in a society fixated on celebrity, motherhood, and the shadowy dangers lurking beneath luxury and fame. The initial shockwaves quickly grew into a tidal wave of public conversation. Hashtags like #FindAllison and #JusticeForHarper trended across all major platforms, as both fans and strangers united in an unprecedented expression of worry, advocacy, and outrage. The immediate community response was deeply emotional. Outside Allison's home, clusters of neighbors gathered nightly in candlelit vigils, decorating the street with flowers, posters, and photos of happier times. Local parents, who'd once exchanged casual hellos at school drop-off, now rallied together, organizing search parties, establishing watch groups, and preparing food for Allison's family. Nearby churches and community centers held prayer circles, inviting people regardless of faith or background. It was as if fear had welded everyone into a temporary family, their unity forged by the blunt reality that what happened to Allison could strike any household. Across social media, the outpouring went beyond platitudes and trended topics. Influencers, many of whom considered Allison a colleague or competitor, posted raw, heartfelt videos sharing their own experiences of online harassment, custody disputes, and the unique vulnerabilities of high-profile women. Several used their platforms to advocate for tougher laws on stalking, domestic violence, and privacy protections, demanding that the tragedy become a springboard for reform. A group of famous Hollywood mothers jointly released an open letter in the Los Angeles Times calling on city officials to prioritize missing persons cases and shield survivors of family-related crime from tabloid exploitation. The response was far from limited to Hollywood or the well-off. In underprivileged neighborhoods, Allison's story resonated as proof that violence and manipulation did not discriminate by zip code, income, or reputation. Shelters and advocacy organizations experienced a surge in calls, women moved by Allison's plight seeking legal and emotional support for situations of their own. Community leaders used the moment to call out the failures of family court systems and the insufficient resources allocated to protecting those at risk of retaliation. City officials scrambled to address the swelling unrest. A special task force combining LAPD, FBI, and social services was assembled to demonstrate a unified response not just to Allison's case, but to the broader epidemic of disappearances and domestic conflict in the city. Local news stations abandoned their usual glitzy coverage for round-the-clock reporting, blending cold updates with editorial calls to action. Newspapers racing to tell the story didn't shy away from tough questions. Why had previous warnings gone unheeded? What systemic gaps had allowed Allison's situation to escalate to catastrophe? Nationally, the case ignited debate on everything from influencer culture and the monetization of personal life to the invisible struggles of blended families. Think tanks and talk shows convened panels of psychologists, legal experts, and survivors to dissect the social pathologies exposed by the investigation. Some argued that the relentless exposure of social media itself had left Allison and others like her open to exploitation and targeting. Others deflected blame to outdated policing protocols or an overly litigious family court system. Internationally, Allison's disappearance became a reference point in conversations about women's rights, the global rise in gender-based violence, and the dark side of sudden celebrity. Journalists drew connections to similar cases in Europe and South America, inviting a cross-cultural reckoning with issues of justice, privacy, and crisis response. Non-profits from as far as Australia cited the Harper case in campaigns for stricter cyberstalking regulation. Through it all, the grassroots movement in Los Angeles remained determined and deeply personal. Volunteers distributed flyers, organized neighborhood patrols, and used encrypted chat channels to share tips with investigators, sometimes turning up leads before official channels could act. Allison's old friends coordinated safe walks for women throughout the city, reframing public spaces as sites not only of fear, but of mutual protection. Psychology hotlines and support groups reported unprecedented surges, their counselors fielding waves of calls from survivors inspired by Allison's legacy to finally speak their own stories aloud. Gradually, the case transformed from personal nightmare to collective movement. Major brands paused advertising to dedicate social media real estate to Allison's case and, more importantly, to resource pages on family violence, trauma, and survivor support. Local universities organized teach-ins on the ethics of true crime coverage, and law schools hosted workshops on legislative reform. Even Allison's critics acknowledged the force of the response, a flashpoint that had galvanized awareness greater than that of any single story in recent memory. Perhaps most profoundly, the ripple effects of community grief and outrage forced even the most cynical lawmakers to act. Within months, new citywide grants funded direct legal assistance for women in custody battles and digital privacy programs for at-risk families. Allison's memory became a watchword in courtrooms, classrooms, and living rooms, a caution, a rallying cry, and for many, a source of hope that collective vigilance could build a safer world. Echoes and lingering uncertainties. Even after the official investigation had concluded and courtrooms had dimmed their lights, the echoes of Allison Harper's disappearance and the gruesome revelations around it continued to ripple through every layer of American consciousness. The city of Los Angeles, already wary of the hidden dangers beneath glamour, found itself haunted not only by the details of the crime, but by how many unsettling questions remained stubbornly unresolved. For those closest to Allison, closure was a mirage. Every new day was a reminder that the truth, like her presence, might never be full. In the months following the verdicts, Allison's name became both a rallying cry and a synonym for tragedy's complexity. Her family, while comforted by the gentle rhythm of communal support, still lived under a shadow of doubt. Linda, Allison's mother, often revisited old photographs and unanswered text messages, searching for signs she should have recognized or words unsaid. Chris, her partner, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the children, yet found himself retracing the sequence of that fateful day, tortured by hypothetical alternatives. What if Allison had refused the meeting? What if the security protocols had been stronger? What if the warning signs had been clearer? Allison's children grappled with the profound displacement of having their lives rewritten by narrative and loss. In therapy sessions, school counselors noted how each child processed trauma differently. Some grew withdrawn, others restless and defiant. Friends and caregivers took turns filling the silence at home, striving to create pockets of joy amidst the persistent sense of absence. There was no instruction manual for grieving a mother whose story had become a public parable. Beyond the walls of the Harper home, the question of motive lingered, as did nagging doubts about the full extent of those involved. Rumors swirled that perhaps one or more key conspirators had managed to escape the net of justice, shielded by legal maneuvering or hidden ties to the city's underworld. Whistleblowers claiming access to case files hinted at redacted names and unpublicized evidence. Late-night talk shows and online forums kept the intrigue alive, dissecting every ambiguous court document and speculating about possible accomplices, greedy investors, corrupt officials, even jealous rivals in the influencer world. While investigators insisted the primary perpetrators were behind bars, the absence of total clarity fanned conspiracy theories for years. At the civic level, legislative committees continued to debate the reforms triggered by Allison's ordeal. Some policies strengthened witness protection, enhanced digital tracing of threatened women, expanded legal aid for custody battles, moved quickly from proposal to enactment. Other inquiries, particularly those probing failures in coordination between social services and law enforcement, stalled amid bureaucracy. Advocacy groups invoked Allison's name as both inspiration and caution, highlighting that meaningful change often comes at a terrible price, and even then, never arrives soon enough for those already lost. Meanwhile, Allison's own digital legacy morphed into something of a living memorial. Her archived Instagram posts, personal essays, and interviews drew millions of visitors every year, many of them posting messages of support, gratitude, or shared grief. Periodically, new commemorative campaigns would surge, fundraisers for crisis shelters, art installations themed around trust and betrayal, community events striving to finish Allison's story through charitable acts. Yet, in all these tributes, there was a common refrain, a yearning not just for answers but for acknowledgement of how lasting trauma hums below the surface of resilience. For the broader public, Allison Harper's fate became a reference point for conversations about celebrity, privacy, and the fragile boundary between personal tragedy and public spectacle. Journalists continued to probe the story's open edges, submitting freedom of information requests and pitching long-form features exploring the psychology of unresolved grief and communal obsession. Documentarians petitioned for interviews with the Harper family, eager to produce the definitive account, though most declined, hoping to shield what little remained of their private world. Academic circles, too, wrestled with the legacy. Sociologists examined how Allison's story sparked introspection about the American family structure, digital age vulnerability, and the ways in which trauma reverberates through children, spouses, and siblings for generations. Law schools analyzed the precedent set by parts of her case, citing it in debates over victim protection, evidence handling, and the ethical perils of media-driven investigations. Among all this, perhaps the greatest source of unease was the sense that not everything could be named, explained, or healed. Some in Allison's circle believed there were hidden dimensions, strands of influence, relationships, or past wounds that had quietly shaped her disappearance, never to be fully understood by the public. Others, while outwardly satisfied by the court's findings, carried their own private doubts and suspicions. The Harper case had taught a bitter truth. In the wake of certain tragedies, resolution is only ever partial, and some answers are lost to silence, fear, or the irretrievable passage of time. Even years later, on anniversaries of the tragedy, new theories and confessions sometimes emerged. A former neighbor might share a strange memory, or an anonymous letter might find its way to a journalist's inbox, reviving speculation for a brief season before fading once again into uncertainty. While Allison's family did what they could to foster healing, through advocacy, charity, and remembrance, there lingered always the question, how much do we ever truly know the people we trust, or the darkness that sometimes surrounds them? Ultimately, the enduring lesson of Allison Harper's story was not simply the cautionary tale of a murder unspeakably cruel, but a fresh awareness of the price of trust, and the courage required to live with questions that may never be answered. Her memory remained not just as tabloid tragedy, but as a rallying cry for vigilance, empathy, and the continual difficult work of seeking and bearing the truth.